This is Daniel Kurganov. I'm head of the live streaming here at Tonebase, and I wanted to welcome you to this month's 2-week intensive, which is going to be all about bow control, improving the quality of our fundamental strokes, and just getting a more comfortable feeling balancing the stick in different situations, right? We don't want kind of one position here to be in stone. We want there to be a level of flexibility so that the bow, that the hand can react to the way that the bow pushes it, right? The more stable the position in terms of gripping, the less it can react to the vibrations created by the stick, right? Many of the bow strokes that we do, like spiccato, require us to yield to the vibrations of the bow, to the natural bounce. So we're going to talk about that. And as you know, we're using Ševčík Opus 3, 40 variations for these exercises. We're going to look at variations 1 through 6 this week. What I really love about Ševčík Opus 3 is that it's great for beginners, if you're just starting to learn these strokes in a serious way, as well as professionals. There are very few among us who don't have little kinks in our bow control, and these exercises are perfect to kind of distill everything down to the real fundamentals. Now, don't forget to download the score. You'll find that in the forum for the 2-week intensive. And just a word about how you should organize your recordings. I do recommend that you record twice this week. And what I would do is record all 6 variations the first time, and then all 6 of them again the second time, instead of just doing the first 3 and then the other 3. This way you can have a sort of baseline after working on it for a couple days, and then track your progress with the next video. Now, there are some other variations I'm going to present, whether it's a different way of doing one of the variations, or one of the things I really like doing is applying these patterns to scales, and I'll show you how we do that as well. So let's just jump in. We're going to skip the theme. It's a nice collection of half notes that you can enjoy on your own time. So for variation 1, we are going to be using 2 strokes mainly. Détaché stroke for the 8th notes, the ones with the lines over them. And this is in the lower half, yes? So you notice for this détaché stroke, I'm not letting the note decay like this. I'm trying to really connect. So that requires letting go of the weight of the arm. It's almost like we're kind of scrubbing something, and the bristles, which are our fingers, are not active, right? We're kind of weighing into them with the weight of the arm, and they're taking care of that connection to the string. Then we have collé, this, which is a wrist stroke. We catch the string, and we pop with the wrist, and we follow through with the arm, right? Otherwise, we'd have a very small stroke, but it's marked forte. So together, it would sound like this. Set, set, set. And there's no need to go any faster than that until you're confident in the strokes. And confidence kind of looks like the ability to start from the string without gripping the bow and kind of forcing it onto the string. Starting from the string means it's a release. Yeah, it's like something is landing and then it lands, right? As opposed to something being pressed. We don't need to press at all here, right? If I just let go of the bow almost completely, quite a lot of sound already. Set, set, set. So that's variation 1. And like I said, this happens in the lower half, and there should be a sense of compactness, right? If things are a bit messy, you might be using too much bow or letting it come off the string. So just keep the bow planted with a very little amount of extra force, right? We have the weight working for us. And make sure this comes from the wrist. And the follow through. Yeah, the colle stroke is very important. Or all of those are colle, and strengthening that stroke will help you in a lot of classical repertoire as well. So that's variation 1. Let's go on to variation 2. So variation 2, there's going to be 2 ways we're going to do variation 2, using 2 different types of spiccato. So the first kind of spiccato will be a kind of simple spiccato, and by simple I mean kind of a U shape, or maybe a slightly sharper U shape, maybe even a V shape. Probably a V shape. Essentially, we're dropping the bow and letting it bounce back up with on its own momentum. Right? If you just drop the bow, you should yield to these vibrations. Right? So around the middle, and I'm using my pinky and my index finger to balance the stick, right? It's like when you bounce a ball, and you have to, when it bounces back up, you have to kind of make contact and apply a little force to bounce it back into the ground. It would go back to the ground by itself anyway, but that resistance you'll apply with the hand, it gives it the sort of rubber banding effect, whereas the next bounce will continue being, of the same power, as opposed to the ball just bouncing on its own and coming to a halt. So I'm using the pinky to lift a little and then bring the bow back down. Now be careful with the sounding point. What we don't want is something too fluffy or something too harsh this way. So that's the sounding point. Then also watch for the amount of bow that you're using. If you use too little bow, it's going to be too percussive. There's too much kind of dirt in the beginning. If you use too much bow, it actually could sound pretty nice, but then it becomes more of a brush stroke. So what we want is something that's pretty articulate. So you can start high, feel that natural bounce, make sure everything is straight. Yeah, pretty flat hair. Don't use the side of the hair for this. It's essentially flat. Find that sweet spot. And you could start lowering the height of the spiccato and try to keep the same quality. We're looking for the ring and for the articulation. So this is what I would call our slow spiccato, where we are controlling every stroke in the sense that we catch each bounce and we send it back down, as opposed to a spiccato like that where it's more of a reflex. You could start this quite slow with that higher bounce. Once that gets more comfortable, you could speed it up a bit and lower the bounce so it's slightly less acrobatic. You see, I am starting from the air, right? You cannot do this stroke if you are too close to the string and kind of slice the string in a... You need this natural bounce. So that's our slower, controlled spiccato. Now, the second variation, and this is already a lot to work on, so depending on your level, you may or may not want to start working on this second variation, which is a bit more challenging. So I call this activated spiccato, and activated spiccato looks like this. And you see the difference between and what I'm doing for the activated spiccato is I'm actually doing a bit of a slice with my forearm. So we talked about that U or V shape, kind of the natural bounce. This is a modification of that. It's no longer just a natural parabola. It's more like, I call it the Nike sign. So there's obviously a maximum speed at which we can do this. But what it does is it gives each spiccato, each note, a bit more life, a bit more vibrance, and a bit more intensity. So I'm actually actively doing each of those strokes as opposed to just letting the bow bounce. So you can practice that slowly. It's kind of like a collé that starts from the air. And it's from the forearm. Yeah, it's like a little jolt of energy from the forearm right before you hit the string, right? So you have to hit the string. At the point at which you hit the string is the point of maximum velocity. So that's kind of approach, and then at the last second. So that's the other kind of spiccato that I find very useful. So try both of those on variation 2. Now let's go on to variation 3. So this is going to be similar to variation 1 in that we're in the lower half, we're using détaché and collé, but now we have piano and forte. So it sounds like this. So the détaché, as I said before, very connected, starting from the string, very even sound, no fall off in the sound. Now this collé is piano, so remember last time we were following through with the arm to get a forte collé. Now you could do it mostly in the wrist, and that'll give you the piano. Make sure you set the first détaché. You see how I'm trying to make a between, right? I'm not letting the strokes kind of bleed into each other. Distinct boundaries. All right, so that's number 3. Now, number 4, this is also in the lower half, kind of at the frog, and we're going to do a lot of retakes here. So it sounds like this. So this is not collé. It's kind of a lifted détaché, you can call it. See, there's breadth to that stroke, but I'm lifting it with a lot of energy and letting it ring. So it's very linear in the sense that there's a stroke and then there's a lift. It's not round. So that way you elongate the note as long as possible for the duration you're holding it. There's no fall off, in other words. So this is something my conductor used to tell me. The loudest part in this particular thing, if you'll take a guess, what's the loudest part? It's actually the rest. The 8th rest. Feel like that's the loudest. D, 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 dum, bum, bum, bum. See, I'm pulling away, and that creates the resonance in this note. It makes sure that I don't slow down or something, like I have to lift. Now this, from the string, use the natural weight. Again, we're trying to be very fast in the air so that the time we spent is mostly on the string, right? So that these short strokes aren't too short. We don't want this. So this variation, it's actually very difficult. It's all about extending those notes to the boundaries and then lifting them quickly. And that's what gets you the intensity and the ringing. Now, variation 5. This is going to be a whole bow with your up bow. Then a collé, whole bow, and the down bow. Could create a little fantasy out of it. So, as you can see, I'm vibrating essentially every note that I can. This is a very singing sort of line. It's forte, but it's not always aggressive. We can play with that. We can start less and build. But fundamentally, it's a singing line. And I'm following through to the second 8th note. Don't make the second 8th note too short. Don't do that. See, it has a little length. And then I set. This is our collé. Set here as well. So I vibrate into the F. I do recommend you practice it slow like that, just so that, again, we need distinct boundaries between the techniques we're using. So we have the fact that we need to start things from the string, combined with the fact that the stroke itself is often singing, and it's not like this kind of stroke. On to variation 6. This is going to be détaché and spiccato. Very much the same spiccato that we practiced in variation 2. So, it goes like this. And so on. See, so I'm trying to make a very, very distinct contrast. And I'm trying to push the détaché, the 14 notes, right to the edge. So. See that subito piano on the F sharp. So don't let the strokes bleed into each other. So practice this slowly. Middle of the bow détaché. You can do a pause at first. Now, if you notice, we have to get this spiccato going from a stop. Yeah, we talked about in variation 2, dropping the bow, right? Here we don't have that luxury. So you have to make sure you lift on that first note. So this is, of course, an act of bow control. And whatever tension and whatever muscles are working for this détaché, you have to preemptively release everything in anticipation for the spiccato. If you carry over any tension into the spiccato, it doesn't work, right? We need the looseness in our body in order to yield to the vibrations of the bow, right? That's a common theme with all bow technique. So, hope you have fun with this one too. Now, as I mentioned, applying these patterns to scales is a very, very good practice. So, variation 1 would be... something like that. You could do 2 octaves, you could do 3 octaves. If that's too difficult, you can actually repeat the first note 3 times. Now, variation 2. You could do that, or now variation 3. So this can replace, at least for some time, it can replace your bowing practice on scales, right? If you do this, you don't have to then also just go over détaché and collé, spiccato separately in your scales. So I really like these for that reason. You'll see it's pretty self-explanatory how to apply the other patterns to scales as well. So as I mentioned, try to post 2 videos this week. Post the first one as soon as you can, maybe like a couple of days of real good practice on this, like very intense practice. Do it very, very slow. Make sure you maximize each stroke and religiously start from the string when it's appropriate. And remember, from the string doesn't mean press, it means you've landed, right? Okay, great. I'm really excited to work on this with you. I'm going to practice this as well. I look forward to seeing your videos. And yeah, it's going to be a fun couple of weeks. Good luck. See you soon.